Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Welcome to the Show Up Dad, where we explore fatherhood and share insights to support dads being present for their families. I'm your host, David Mendonca. Today we'll be talking about family, children, and their roles as fathers. But before we start, I want to thank our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Tallman Equipment, your go-to source for quality tools and equipment in the power line industry. Visit tallmanequipment.com to see their selection of tools. I also want to give a shout out to the Show Up Dad Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to helping fathers become more engaged in their families through workshops and community support. To learn more about our mission, visit theshowupdadfoundation.org. Today's guest is Dr. Greg Stewart. He lives in Rockwell, Texas, and is currently a full-time telehealth counselor, executive coach, and consultant. He has a BA in organizational leadership from Cornerstone University, a Master of Divinity from Grand Rapids Theological Seminary, and an MA in counseling, and a PhD in counselor in education and supervision through Regent University. His dissertation was the relationship of emotional intelligence to job satisfaction and organizational commitment. He wrote a trilogy on this concept of I-cubed information, interpretation, and intensity. The first is I3, unlock the inner strength behind your negative emotions. His second book for couples, facing our negative emotions to build intimacy in marriage. And his third book, which is I-cubed for leaders, which is unleashing the rage of negative emotions against the obstacles of becoming more. Welcome to our show, brother.
And thank you, David. Obviously, this is my honor and pleasure. Thank you so much, man.
Absolutely. Well, I'd like you to just share about your story there, Greg. How did you get in a part of all this, doctor? Please.
All right. So I'll begin early, but don't worry. It's a short story. In junior church back in the 70s, I got accepted Christ as my savior. And then my parents were going to church, which meant I could go to church. And then I did the party hardy teen years, as a lot of us, and then suffer the consequences from those years. And then recommitted my life to Christ right before I turned 21. So I eventually landed back at the same church. I got saved as a kid. And then during that time, I felt called into the ministry. So I spent a summer of 1993 in Guyana, South America. Was officially called to the ministry back then. So came back and then did a year of a Bible Institute in upstate New York. And then was called to be the youth pastor at the very, very same church I got saved as a kid. So, but back then in the 90s, a lot of us were, we had like tons of credit hours, but no degree. So like I had 160 credit hours, but no degree. So they started the adult and continuing ed programs back in the day. So I did that, and it was like one night a week for a year. So the program from Cornerstone University was in organizational leadership. And it was good stuff, but I wanted to get onto seminary because that was my passion. But the first semester in seminary, I took philosophy of counseling, and my eyes were just blown away open at how powerful the material was, not only to be used in ministry, but obviously to show how many issues I personally had. So I mapped out a dual master's degree, and in between those two degrees, so I got my MDiv in 3 years and got ordained in 2000. But right in the year 2000 became another defining moment where I became an adjunct professor just to earn some extra money and just teach in all the organizational leadership courses I took in undergrad. Then I fell in love with organizational leadership. At the same time, I was actually on vacation and perusing the psychology section of Barnes & Noble and came across the book Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman, and was blown away by that material. But at the same time, I was underneath a leader who had great guy, he was a pastor, but had a lot of emotional intelligence struggles. So got my master's in counseling and then became the senior pastor of the church. And then I started my PhD in counselor and supervision, but I did my dissertation, as you said, in EI as it relates to job satisfaction and organizational commitment. So after that is when there was a VP of HR of a major division of Stryker Medical, a powerful company up in Michigan. And that's where I cut my kind of organizational coaching and consulting teeth on. So eventually moved to Texas and joined a company, and we flew around the country for 3 years, coaching senior leadership teams, doing executive coaching. I absolutely loved it. And then eventually actually worked at a behavioral health hospital, then eventually doing what I'm doing now. So a very, very incredible, powerful career. Outside of all that really cool success and degrees, back in 2011, after I had 15-year stint at my first church, I ended up having an emotional affair. And then as a pastor and a marriage counselor, it just completely, as you might imagine, decimated me. So
Yeah.
that began a 10-year journey of me stopping everything kind of and doing a deep dive into Greg and the negative emotions and saying, I've got to figure this out. And the Lord just did some incredible revelations, which I talk about in my book, until this was the culmination. So in the last year, I've always wanted to write a book on IQ because I actually had that principle begin 25 years ago. But
Yeah.
the Lord was like pausing me on writing books until all this took place. And then the 3 books just came out, like 3 books in a year. So that's kind of the background of it all. Why, coaching, consulting, and as well as
Yeah.
marriage counseling.
It's pretty interesting how you were a marriage counselor and, you fell into this emotional affair. And I point that out because it could happen to anybody, right? We all fall short of the glory of God. And when we are in those positions to where we're doing the marriage counseling and stuff like that, sometimes it's hard to see the forest through the trees. You can't really see the big picture. You can't see that. And you lose track of everything else. And before you know it, you're in sin and you're captivated in this sin and you're asking God, how did I get here? What was your aha moment for that? Like, how did that transpire or what?
Well, the entire episode, like affair took like 6 months. And then it was in 2000, then it ended. And then I knew kind of, obviously I was seeing what was happening, but I was stuck. I was trapped. But in
Yeah.
January of 2012, I started to see a counselor that I knew, and we're actually in my office, and I was kind of pouring my heart out to him and just saying, I was so frustrated because I just feel like, I pursue everybody else harder than they pursue me. And I just started rambling. And then I just made this statement that I've never said before. I mean, I've never said these words. I just screamed out, I just want them to make my world. And right then, David, the Spirit of God gave me an instant vision of, there was this round table with all these dominoes on top of the table, and they're all standing up. And on top of the dominoes were all these faces.
Yeah.
And couldn't make them out, but I knew everybody. And the Spirit of God just didn't blow the dominoes over. He blew them off the table and said, I make your world. And I just started crying. And that began that journey of healing, where it was the Lord saying to me that I'm the one that make your world. I'm the one, because I wanted to be pursued by humans. And
Yeah.
eventually the Lord, kind of gave me a tool shed moment and said, Greg, you always complained about wanting to be pursued and admired, but you have never pursued me like I pursued you.
Wow.
And it was a mic drop moment. But the Lord, literally gave me visions, and I talk about the visions he gave me and prophetic words. It was powerful, but it was basically, the point was I had to stop, because I have this premise in the book of all negative emotions are exposing something in you.
Yes.
Right. So I had to stop. And so I talk about in the book, all the books, we got to put down the microscope and pick up the mirror. Right. And in that process, don't let yourself off the hook. Figure out what's being exposed in you. And it transpires from, my individual, like individual to couples, like our marriages. We got to figure out what's being exposed in us. The amount of emotion I have is not my spouse's issue. It's mine. And then all the way to leadership, because we want to change the world. But when our value and worth is kind of getting exposed and involved here, that our emotion inflates, that's an issue we have. So we have to walk into those negative emotions first.
I like that you said that, because it's absolutely true. God is not after our comfort. He is after our character.
Yeah.
And he will use these moments, the refining process. He talks about how he refines silver and gold, and he has to heat it up to a certain degree to remove the dross, right? So all those impurities have to raise up. And that's the same thing what he does to us when he puts us in that furnace. When we're put in these situations where we're being pressed, we're being crushed. Even look at the olive, right? In order to get that good oil that is needed at one point in time, that was like a commodity. It was like fuel, right? In order to get that oil out of that little olive, they had to really put it through a tremendous amount of pressure. And we see that throughout the world. We see that through all these different examples, from the pressure of a diamond to the oil, like I said, to, even what we're just talking about.
Butterfly in the cocoon, right? So,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Right? So I'll begin like kind of at the beginning where of my book, where the premise is that everything we're doing, let's say I'm just going to frame it from the vantage of a guy.
Mm-hmm.
Everything we're trying to do, I mean, all humanity, men and women, we're trying to achieve an emotional goal. Everything. Now I know guys struggle with emotions, but let me just hear me out. So we're trying to achieve an emotional goal. Like there's micro emotional goals, like I'm thirsty. I don't want to feel thirsty, right? But over here, hovering next to me is macro emotional goals. And those macro emotional goals, always in my periphery, is basically our quality of life as kind of described as our standard of living, right? We want to provide, have a high standard of living, but also living our values and fulfilling destiny, calling, and purpose. So the emotional goals are good. The first analysis we have to do is analyze the path we take to achieve the emotional goals. And I talk about, like, for instance, stress, right? So we want to not feel stress, but we choose the path of drinking alcohol every night at 5 o'clock, right? So we have to assess the path. The emotional goal is good, but the path needs to pass the test. And I use this in all the books of rational, healthy, wise, and right. Just all the way through that. We have to evaluate ourselves, rational, healthy, wise, and right. So that's the path. But that's step one. Step two is I kind of picture it as a house. So behind us is the house of our heart, right? Yeah. And we're standing on the front lawn, guarding the house of our heart, right? And before us are all the people and different things, bosses, our spouse, whatever, triggering our negative emotions, which is, I mean, again, every human being ever. But number one is, this is where you have to put the microscope down, because while we assess, like, let's say, for instance, David, you call me a name or something stupid, right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, how big of a deal is that? So you have to kind of assess the impacts. Like, what's the ramifications for you calling me a name, and how much emotion, because I say emotion is energy. How much emotional energy do I need to burn? Well, it's like a 1. But what I notice is this. It's a 1, but I'm at a 6, 7, or 8. I call that the inflation of emotions. So like I said, I need to burn out and say, hey, Dave, don't call me that, right?
Yeah.
But the 6, 7, or 8 is not David's issue. It's mine. So I have to stop, pick up the mirror, and I have to walk into the house of my heart. And the first room has to do with insecurity. And then the different rooms, like there's the insecurity, anxiety, fear, worry, anger, depression. So anxiety's in the kitchen, right? Nervous, right? Then there is fear that's crouched in the hallway. Worry's looking out the front window. Anger's pacing in the bedroom, and depression's laying in bed, right? So insecurity is the first room. So there's 3 main reasons for the inflation. The first reason is because we believe lies. It's always about lies, right? So we know that Satan, he doesn't have a toolbox. He has a holster, and that's lies, okay? And those lies come in the form of me, he, we. So lies about myself, lies about God, or lies about our relationship, right? Yeah. So we have to address lies. It could be something like even psychological, like, I'll never get a job. Emotions don't produce themselves. They come from sentences in our mind. And we have to first address lies, because there's no solving a lie. It's just producing a lot of emotion. But secondly, in the room of insecurity. So let me tell you a little story, like from Michigan. So I was 14 years old working at a hamburger joint. I believe it or not, David, I used to be a super sarcastic guy, teenage guy, right? So one time I teased this girl so bad, one time I made her cry. And as she's walking away crying, I yell out, "You wouldn't get so ticked off if it wasn't true." But another defining moment, because I stopped and I actually turned it on myself. And I was like, oh my gosh, Greg, every time you get upset, defensive, angry when somebody trash talks you or points something out, there actually has to be truth to it, or else it wouldn't work. When I just started observing people, it was, man, the only way for trash talk to actually work, besides, of course, the your mama jokes, right? The only way for the trash talk to work is for it to be true. So that's where I started saying, if it's true, that's my issue, or else I wouldn't care about the exposure. But off the room of insecurity is a door that leads to the basement. The second reason for the inflation is when we hear that you take things personally. We hate hearing that, but that's what's happening. So in the basement is the machine of our identity, value, and worth, right? And so we take things personally. It's impacting our value and worth. And off in the corner of the cellar, dingy cellar, is the cellar door of trauma. There could be big T trauma, like the official stuff, or little T trauma, which all of us have probably gone through negative experiences. So what happens is that inflation of emotion happens. So as dads, as fathers, as husbands, that's where it's like, look, we don't like emotions, but we have them. So you better put down the microscope and quit talking about the things out there that you're ticked off about and why. And you need to figure out, why do I have so much? If it truly, because we recognize that if this issue, whatever it is, honestly, it should only deserve a 1 or a 2, but I'm at a 6, 7, or 8. That is our issue, guys. And we got to walk into that. That's the key.
That's interesting, because the Bible clearly says life and death are in the power of the tongue, right? I had a good friend of mine, a pastor friend of mine, who'd always tell me, David, watch your words. He's like, your voice is your gift that God's given you, right? He's like, out of that same mouth, you bless people and you curse people. He's
yes. And so I love the Proverbs, because another one, the one that has always convicted me, there's several, of course, but it's, do you see a city, a man who has no self-control is like a city who has no walls. The walls are broken down. That is no impulse control. Matter of fact, in my leadership book here, right, IQ for Leaders, the first thing what I do is I said in the dedication, I said, I dedicate this book not to the fool, but to the foolish. The fool is hard-hearted. And I actually list like 2 pages of Proverbs. You can't see it. 2 pages of Proverbs that address the fool. Like, the fool delights in airing his own opinion, right? There's another one that it's, do not speak in the presence of a fool, because they will despise the wisdom of your words. And that's where it leads to me in my second chapter in the first book, that it's my mental model, right? Made up of DNA, life experiences, and choices, that my mental model is saying at every point, Greg, think this, Greg, feel this, Greg, do this. But brother, a long time ago, I said, my mental model is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I don't care how many degrees I have, right? So there's 2 things, or 3 things. I don't have all the information, which is the I cubed. Number 2 is the formulas, right? That's right. I was a math major in undergrad, so that's where the I cubed come from. So my formulas by which I process are off. I know they're off somewhere. And third, and this is the biggie, I'm blind somewhere. So it has to do with teachability. And then, like, the leadership books use terms like humility, which of course is a good word, but vulnerability. But I found in those leadership books, there has to be so much explanation around the disclaimers. Right. So why don't we just say teachability? Teachability is this. I don't have all the information. My mental model is off. So especially the blind area, how do we eradicate the blind area? The only way to do it, Proverbs 2, he who searches for insight, wisdom, and understanding, search for it like it's hidden treasure, like it's gold. Then you will get it. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord. You must begin with the premise. Teachability is the gateway to all growth. You must not be prideful. What's pride? Pride is, no, I'm good, David. I've got all the information I need, buddy. Thanks. And what is pride? It's, no, the way I formulate, the way I process and interpret information, no, I'm good, but thanks. That's pride. The opposite is humility, which means, no, renew my mind. You have insight that I don't have. And proactive teachability is me going to David saying, David, you and I are brothers. I need you to tell me where I can grow. And you're like trying to be sweet, like, oh man, I think you're a great guy. I'm like, nope, Dave, nope. I'm going for the final 10%. The final 10% that's in the back of your mind that you think about me that you would never, ever share. I want that. And for 2 reasons. One is you might think some stuff about me that honestly is not true. I'd like to correct. But secondly, you might have insight into me that I don't get, because what is the blind area? It's something you see about me that I don't see about myself.
Yeah.
So understanding just the concept of emotion and emotional goals and all that. But secondly is the second chapter of my first book of, we have got to go. I mean, the intensity of Proverbs 2. It's not just a matter of, hey, I'm open. That's reactive teachability. You confronted me. Hey, I'm so sorry, man. No, proactive teachability is you are foaming at the mouth, looking for insight, wisdom, and understanding. Then you'll understand the fear of the Lord. And that is a big deal for us men, is we got to put away our ego and our significance, which is a beautiful emotional goal, and go after wisdom and insight and understanding. That unlocks everything.
Wow. It's interesting how just having that vulnerability, starts unlocking all these doors. And I say it all the time, even in our industry with linemen, if you don't know something, speak up, don't have that pride, don't have that ego to not say you don't know. Right. Because in our industry, people get killed, the power line industry, if you can't fake it till you make it in our trade, someone's not going to come home,
There's no trial and error, right?
There's no trial and error. You know what I mean?
Right. Right.
But
So, and let me just flip it. Let me just flip it and say this, especially when it comes to leaders. I talk about my leadership book. It kind of takes a different vein. Like the first couple books, it's like, hey, you have negative emotions, like walk into them. They're going to expose the crap out of you, but don't worry, at the end, it's going to be cool, right? Both in yourself and in your marriage. But in the IQ for leaders, it's unleash the rage of your negative emotions against the obstacles of becoming more, right? So in the leadership book, it takes on a different tone of, and I'd say this to all the guys, how many times have you thought, gentlemen, that you wish leaders in your life, other men in your life, other people would apply proactive teachability? How many times do you say, gosh, you are blind, and I would love it if you would ask me, hey, how can I grow? So we see it, we see the ramifications, all of us do. We see the ramifications of pride. We see the ramifications of when people don't get it. So if we see it and we're sitting there as men observing going, wow, they don't see it, but my gosh, they really need to ask somebody how they can grow. And if we recognize it in other leaders and we have our entire lives, then how much more should we be passionate about eradicating the blind area in our own life? It becomes automatic.
yeah,
Because my question is, I say it in the book, isn't the scariest thing in the world to think that other people are thinking that about you, right? Man, I wish Greg would just ask me where he's blind, right? So I assume that there are people in my life that wish I would ask them because I wish others would ask me. And it's just, again, what's the goal? What's the goal? And humility is that why am I so trying to self-protect so much my ego, which has to do with value and worth? Because I'm take things personally, which means if you say or think something negatively about me, oh my gosh, my value and worth and significance is impacted, which is a lie because I control my value and worth, right? The Lord answers that. Go ahead.
Isn't that where knowing who you belong to comes in effect, right?
Yep. That's what identity, value, and worth is that, taking away, like, again, it's understandable as a kid, we get the value and worth from our parents, obviously, right? So, because we don't know, we're kids. But eventually we have to take back that control. And I have this triangle where the first thing is it's God. So what does God think of me? And again, what God thinks of me, both in grace and truth. So it's not just God is just automatically telling us and correcting us. God is also calling us out and saying, listen, you see yourself as a sinner, but I don't call believers sinners anymore in the New Testament. What do I call believers in the New Testament? Saints, priests, kings, and so on. So you don't have to do something powerful or strive to get to me. You're already there. So the big switch, this is why Christianity works and is the truth, is God is saying to us, you don't have to become these things, these labels. You already are them. I'm trying to teach you to live out what you already are, royalty, right? And we as men, which again, there's a validity to us, like God has called us to a destiny, calling, and purpose, that's the rage, which is good. But as far as in our core, in our identity, God is saying you're already there. That's why he tells us to abide in him. Right? So he doesn't tell us look, work harder. That's every other religion. He says, abide in me. You've got to be secure enough that to submit yourself, because as Jesus, this verse has rocked me this entire year. As a son, because back in January, the Lord told me in my prayer, Greg, you've never learned how to be a son. And there's a whole story there we won't get into, but when the verse that he immediately brought to my mind in Hebrews 5, it says, as a son, Jesus learned obedience to the things that he suffered. And the suffering was not the cross, it's his life. So the Trinity, like what should happen is the son is a little bit like honor, respectful, and fearful of the father. Like, don't play, boy. That fear is good because it keeps us like in the morality bumper lanes of a bowling alley. So we stay because we're out of fear and respect. And then we fulfill our destiny, calling, and purpose. Once we fulfill our destiny, calling, and purpose within those bumper lanes, then I have twin boys and a grandson, right? Go Dean, right? Right? So I look to my son, but because I've already fulfilled destiny, calling, and purpose and legacy, it's the whole point I wrote these books, is now I say all glory goes to my sons. But what happens when that falls apart? The father who's never reached that security, he starts competing with his son. The toxic masculinity is from, I don't have my own value and worth and my own significance. So I need to find it by competing with you, by insulting you. Come on, boy. Right. And
Yeah.
that's what damages the whole process. So if we are secure, then that's the point but we have to learn obedience first. So the obedience actually unleashes power. The submission reins in the energy that we have because what's the Lord know? Guys, the worst thing you ever want to experience is guilt and shame. You know, gents, what guilt and shame is, and it's crippling and it stops your power. So to keep you in the lanes of morality, you've got to submit yourselves as the Son did. So the power can be channeled and funneled where I want it to be. That is what creates your confidence and significance instead of guilt and shame. That's what he wants to unleash in us.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a mentor, a pastor friend of mine who always says, God will not do by miracle what he's called you to do by obedience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
we're in charge of the natural. He's in charge of supernatural.
Yep. He's called us to be obedient. You know, he doesn't require sacrifices. We've already had a sacrifice, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He requires our obedience. And life is a process of sanctification.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, and it all begins with, like, say, for instance, that as far as being teachable and open and looking for wisdom and insight, I mean, that's actually looking for wisdom and insight's attractive. Like, I want wisdom and insight. That's like, because it makes me more powerful. But the way to get there, though, is the actual telltale sign is that we've got to walk into the negative emotions. And that's the step. It's we got to figure out what's being exposed in us, because if we don't go deeper, because that's Satan's lie. Satan's lie is those negative emotions prove you're insignificant. Lie from the pit of hell. The negative emotions is like what we say is like, I'm trying to fulfill this destiny, calling, and purpose. If I just get through this stuff and get this crap out of the way, and the Lord's saying, nope, you scoop up that stuff, you plop it right between us, because that's where the miracle happens. And all I can say is, right, again, I don't care about my degrees. I am a man. And I had to go into miracle territory and figure out what's being exposed in me. Because again, it was actually what was being exposed that I wanted to get rid of was insecurities, was childishness. But we can ignore that exposure thing. But what happens is the insecurity and the childishness stays and it controls. And I don't want it to. I want it gone. So all the way from like leadership, and I have a leadership quotient where it's four things. It's IQ. Right. So we maximize our IQ, training, and critical thinking skills, but personality and emotional intelligence, right, which is theory of everything. But the key is, the last one is to spiritual development and destiny. And David, I cannot tell you how many men have reached out to me via counseling, like in their mid 30s, and said, I'm successful, VP HR. I actually had at the same time two doctors from Houston, a radiologist and anesthesiologist, like making over $300K a year. And yet they said, is this it? What they were missing is that destiny, calling, and purpose. I call it the Iron Man core, right? In the movie, like that Iron Man core that creates destiny, but that it kept that shrapnel. What is that shrapnel? It's life's annoyances. If we don't have that Iron Man core, like life's annoyances kill our heart, and they reach out because they don't have that Iron Man core. And the Lord's saying, like, when we say train up a child in the way they should go, the way they should go has nothing to do with like morality. That's part of it. But the way they should go is like, I have a calling for them. Train your child up in the way I designed them to change the world. Because, the meta narrative of Genesis 1, 2, 3, and 4, that Genesis 1 and 2 is awesome. Genesis 3, everything goes to hell. But Genesis 4, if you notice in that passage, it says that these descendants started becoming shepherds and herdsmen. These descendants started making tools. And then these descendants started making musical instruments. And it was the musical instruments that piqued my interest, because here's the truth, that from Genesis 4 on, it's God and man responding to what happened in Genesis 3. So every job on earth ever, and every technological advancement is either trying to solve a human problem or enhance the human experience. That is everything. So shepherds and herdsmen actually has to do with like that's you guys. That's like stabilization of society, right? Yeah. That's right. Then there is solving a human problem, like hospitals. But then when I wrote the IQ for Leaders book, I talk about it. I wrote the book on a cruise. That has nothing to do with solving a problem. It's enhancing human experience. So whatever it is, I worked these men. I mean, dozens and dozens and dozens of men. And they came to me for one purpose, to find their mission. That's your spiritual destiny. that is what just creates this rage of, I must do this in my life. This is my calling, my purpose. This is why I was born.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, man, life is just, it's something that literally sucks the life out of you. That's the key.
Do you feel that that's why a lot of men are depressed because of not having that
I
purpose?
mean, hands down, no question. Hands down.
Okay.
They don't feel significant, right? Now, there is significance, of course, in being a great dad,
Yeah.
a great husband, but even the best dads, the best husbands, the best successful workers. And again, it's not a negation of how important those things are, but it's what God has designed. It's a man needs to feel, I'm changing the world and I'm leaving a legacy. And the legacy I want to leave is how I changed the world. And that's the key. That's why they're depressed.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. I mean, you even see it like with older retirees, as soon as you lose that purpose of going to work or whatever, and they stop working. I don't know what the exact date is, but I think it's like within the year,
like 6 months or something crazy.
Yeah, it's something crazy. Yeah, they just succumb, They no longer have a purpose. I had a friend of mine who his father's still alive, and he was in his 60s and he's a lineman. And he said his old man would always walk down to the AM PM to go get the paper. His son is like, Dad, what are you doing? You could have it delivered at your house. He's like, yeah, I know, but this gives me a purpose. I walk down there, I talk to people, I get my cup of coffee, I get my paper, and I walk back. And that's what I look forward to in my day.
Yeah. So what's his key purpose? Talking to people to impact their world.
Yep.
Right. So, I mean, it's not a matter of, it's not the degree, because I mean, there's a glass ceiling God has set for every one of us, like IQ. We're born with an IQ, can't do anything about it. Same thing with the glass ceiling. Like, I'm not going to be as, speaking of God honor Charlie Kirk, I'm never going to be as impactful as Charlie Kirk. That's not the issue, guys. That's not the issue. The issue is not the glass ceiling. I believe we're going to be held accountable to reach it. But here's the mystery and the beauty of it all. Guys, you have no friggin' clue what your glass ceiling is of impact. Do not sell yourself short, right? So when we're sucking on oxygen, right, what are we going to be worried about? What we're going to be worried about is it's how we lived our lives. It's relationships and legacy. It's the relationships of our family, right? Because they're the ones that are going to bury us. And legacy, which is impact on the world. At the end of the day, I mean, I love golf. I'm one of those dorks, right? It's not my golf score, right? It's not even my standard of living. It's relationships and legacy. And that's where in my first book, I said, I am writing this book. And again, my heart truly is this. I don't care if I sell one copy. It's now in print. Yeah. So my grandson, Dean, that's my grandpa. This is what he thought. This is how he's impacted me. These 3 books, I've got more to write. That's my legacy, right? Because a good man leaves an inheritance for his children's children. Doesn't have to be money, right? It's legacy, impact on the world, baby.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something they can never take from you either.
Yeah, exactly.
But that's left. That's history. I always ask, my apprentices and stuff like that, like where they came from and, how they got here or whatever. And some of them know. A lot of these young men, they don't know. They have no idea. They don't even know what culture they come from or anything. And I always tell them, I'm like, do you realize you are here today because your family, your ancestors survived the plague, they survived war, they survived famine, they survived coming across, if they came from Europe, coming across the ocean. They survived all these things for you to be here.
Yeah. And my grandson, Dean, his middle name is Milan, which is actually my grandpa's name, his great grandpa. So my grandpa was a World War II, so born in 1925, Depression. In 1943, he turned 18, joined the Marines, and was an island hopper to take back. This dude's like 18, 19 years old, my grandpa, and he went hand-to-hand combat with Japs, killed Japs. A grenade exploded. There was shrapnel on his back. He got taken out the next day. He came to and wanted to go back, and he said, your entire platoon's dead, right? That's legacy. Yeah. And so I wish I'd have been in the military. I honor all of you vets. Thank you for your service. I wish I would have joined the armed services, right? But my legacy is different. My legacy is this stuff where I want to equip men to not fall into the lies that Satan has about me, he, we. lies about yourself, that you're not worth it. They're lies, right? God loves you. He's powerful, and your relationship is powerful, and he wants to unleash the royalty that's within you.
Yeah.
That's truth. That's what I want to help. That's because my mission statement is to blow away the bell curves, which means what my mission is like, it starts with what is it about the world you can't stand? There's a million problems, but what is it about the world you can't stand? I cannot stand mediocrity. Mediocrity, because it always comes down to whatever the issue is, you got to get down to how does this issue eradicate the human soul? And God agrees with you. Mediocrity eradicates the human soul. I cannot stand mediocrity. So like becoming more, that's my business, becoming more. Everyone becomes what they want to, only some people think about it. Right. So it's become more. It's more than what we are. It's annihilate mediocrity.
Yeah.
Right.
How does mediocrity annihilate the soul?
Mediocrity, because what God has called you, like there's 100 Gregs. So there's comparison like me compared to other people, but nope, there's 100 Gregs. That's what I'm saying about our glass ceiling. So there's a Greg that's at the 100 percentile who is killing it as a dad, as a husband, is killing it so there's a gap between where I am in each of my roles as a father, as a husband, as a counselor. There's a gap. And God says, there is this 100 percentile Greg. Do not stay in the middle of the bell curve. That's the middle, 50% below, 50% above. Mediocrity is death. I did not call you to that. Right? Through lies, Satan wants to keep you ineffective, mediocre. Right? And that's what it is. Yeah. God has called us to be him, right? So is God mediocre, right? No. Of course he's not. God is creative. He's powerful. He unleashes his power and change. He changes the universe. He impacts the universe. Like the gates of hell not prevail against it. Like, no, we are called to be powerful. People who are mediocre, they're not powerful. I can't stand mediocre. So, and I try and take away those lies that keep men, women in that mediocre of just good enough. I'm fine. Nope. It's from the pit of hell.
Yeah. I like that you said that, just good enough. Cause a lot of us, right. And we're going to take it back to fathering, right? Yeah. A lot of us think that just because we're a little bit better than our parents, we're doing a good job. And that's not what God's called us to, that standard.
Right.
God has called us to lead our families. God has called us to train up our children in the fear and admonition of the Lord. God has called us to raise them to maturity, their character, their values.
So I had a major like revelation from God that it's generational. So my grandpa, his dad left the family. So it's my grandpa felt my dad, my great grandpa said to him, "You are nothing." My grandpa gets back from World War II, has a family, and he tells my dad, because I know what my dad experienced with my grandpa. Yeah. My grandpa says, "Well, you're something. I just don't know what." My dad says to me, "You're something, and this is what you are. And you're so powerful, but I don't know how to teach you to get there," because he couldn't. I say to my sons, "You're powerful, and I can show you how to get there." That's when we say generational. It's not generational curses, because curse you can't get out of. Generational sins. How do you break generational sins? You fast forward that track, because we've all experienced like dads, grandpas, whatever, and that's what it always comes down to. That's like in my book. Next book is going to be, that's what it is. Like the first one says receives, you are nothing, but then they keep their family together. So I didn't leave my family. So I say to my kids, like, "Well, you're something. I just don't know what." And then their kids say to their kids, "You're something, and you're this and this, and I believe in you. I just can't. I don't know how to get you there to unleash that."
Yeah.
So the Lord like revealed to me. I'm holding all. He just gave this intense moment of all something like this breaking of all these floors crashing, and I'm taking the pain of my great grandpa, my grandpa, my dad onto me, and then I'm protecting my twin boys and my grandson from that pain, because I can tell them what they are and I can show them how to get there. That's legacy.
Yeah,
no, little deep, but that's what God showed me this weekend.
Yeah, no, that's definitely legacy, especially when you can speak life into their lives, when you can speak that life.
And speaking life doesn't mean you're being soft, because Jesus came full of grace and truth. So grace and empathy, this is what we're afraid of. Grace and empathy without truth and boundaries is enablement. That is a absolute demonic cancer sin in our culture. Grace and empathy without truth and boundaries is enablement. But guys, truth and boundaries without grace and empathy is toxic. That's what it is. So don't be afraid to speak life, because we also need to speak truth. The truth will set them free, but in their striving, they fail and they're scared and they feel like they blew it. No, you're powerful. God says you're powerful. You're a saint, you're a priest, you're a king. That's speaking life. But the truth is, this is what you got to face in your own heart.
Yeah.
Right. And I can't do it for you. You've got to face it. You've got to man up. So the truth comes in, but the grace is there saying, you got this. Jesus came full of grace and truth.
And it's interesting too, because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, right? You can sit there, you could tell them about the log in their eye or whatever, right? And, sometimes they don't want to see it. They don't want to see it. They don't want to deal with it. They live in denial, and that's not a river. You know what I mean? It's unfortunate, but I think what God does is he comes right at the perfect moment. Some people plant seeds, some people water, but God is the one that causes the increase, right? So you could plant that seed and someone can come 5 years later and water that seed, and then you'll have the fruit from that,
Right. And that's the key. That's the other piece of it too. And I'm glad you brought that up, that, that's where community is important. Right. So like a little bit jealous, but there's been other men that have spoke into my son's lives. Right. It's like, oh, that was like a defining moment for them. I'm like, I wanted that defining moment, but that's being childish. Right.
Yeah.
So trust the community that God brings other men, because I have a role, but there's baggage, right? So somebody else comes in just the right time that God uses, which I want them to experience. And then boom, it unleashes that in my sons. So trust in that, in the community of believers, of other men. Like there's a great book called The Raising a Modern Day Knight. And it just, I got that book and it talked about rites of passage. So one of the greatest things I ever did with my twin sons is when they were 13, right? That's when we moved to Texas, and we literally got here on their 13th birthday. So a month or so later, I took their uncles and we went on a retreat on their 13th birthday, and we each spoke into their lives, right? So they go through their teenage years. At 18, we did another retreat, and I got my buddies, like godly men, and we went on another retreat, and then we each had a message and spoke into our son's life. Then it's tap into the power of other men and their stories, because God will use them to transform our sons and daughters, right? Obviously, into that, because we had many men, many people speaking to our lives. It's community. That's what God has designed, right?
And I think it's important too, because I even see it with my boys. I always try to get them around watching me talk to other men, whether it be in our industry, whether it be about God, whatever. You know what I mean? Like I'll take them to like the International Lineman Rodeo. And they'll get to see daddy, how he converses with other men, right? They'll get to see daddy talk to other men in the faith as well. And I think it's important, because then they can start gathering and be like, okay, so this is how men are supposed to act. This is how men are supposed to, and it could be negative or positive, right?
I was just going to say, one of the most powerful is that another man spoke into my dad's life and kind of smoked him. I was like, oh my gosh, like my dad needs to hear this.
Yeah.
And then my dad responded. He was teachable, he was humble, and he was grateful, because all the way through the Proverbs again, right? Faithful are the wounds of a friend. So our boys will walk away saying, oh my gosh, if I watch and that's like leadership, again, proactive teachability. When our leaders go to other people saying, hey, how can I grow? Our dads go to other people, go to us and say, how can I grow? I want to grow. Changes us forever. Because again, we all know every human being should be that open and teachable. But my dad did it, right? And he was hurt. He was a little bit broken from that truth. And I heard from my dad, and I wanted to rescue him, but he needed that. But man, he responded. That changed my life forever.
Yeah.
It's like, in the truth, because my dad became so much more powerful after that. The truth will set you free. So it's not only my dad being powerful and significant and speaking into other men's lives, it's the times in which my dad got smoked and he took it and responded well and grew from it.
Yeah.
That is what changed my life. Man, it's powerful.
It is powerful, especially seeing how humble your father was to receive that correction.
Exactly.
That's
Pride.
yeah,
No pride, man.
you're teaching your children. I have the habit of asking my kids how I'm doing,
Good for you.
and I do that on a daily basis. Now my daughter lives with me, and I ask her, "How's daddy doing?" And she'll tell me, "Man, this little girl,
Right.
not a little girl,
Right.
she's a young woman, right? But
Right.
she tells me the truth, and man, sometimes that truth hurts, but it is very freeing, like you say.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of like the sarcasm. Speaking of, comes back again. I actually joke about this in my book. I said, "Hey, ask you, are you a good listener? And if you answer yes, and my next question is, have you ever asked somebody that you're listening to if they feel heard by you? Are you a good father? Yeah, I think so. Have you ever asked your children? How can I grow? Are you a good spouse? Right? So bless you, David, because it's like we sit there and evaluate ourselves like leaders. It's like leaders. Are you a good leader? I think so. Have you ever asked your followers, da da da? Like, right? But again, it's that humility changes when you ask your followers how you can grow. It changes the entire atmosphere of the organization. Absolutely, because truth is unleashed, both in positive and negative, man. Grow, learn, become more than what you are, man.
Yeah, and that's the only way, like you said, you can grow, because otherwise you're blinded. You're deceiving yourself. We talked about the enemy a lot, and he's a great deceiver. He's been so since the beginning, and that's what he likes to do, is keep you deceived, keep you in that darkness, keep you without that truth, thinking that you're doing okay. That's his whole goal. If he can keep you stagnant, if he can keep you from growing, he's done his job. He doesn't need to even steal, kill, and destroy from you, because he's doing it by keeping you in that position where you are rusting. My younger brother used to always say that all the time. He's like, if you rest, you rust. Meaning if you're not moving around, you're not doing something, you're going to rust, right? And it's absolutely true, even in our Christian walk. You got to be constantly growing. Life is a process of sanctification, But man, thank you for your insights. If there's one thing you'd like to share, you shared quite a lot of different things, but right now, if you want to leave one more truth nugget to our listeners, something that life or death or whatever, what would you want to tell our audience right now?
Yeah. So in some way, shape, or form, and I think there's not much work to do here. It's when I started talking about the mission statement, the gentlemen that are out there know of what I speak, and it's a splinter in their mind, meaning God, for every human being, he has called us to a destiny, calling, and purpose. And if you do not know what yours is, you must be relentless in discovering it. That's your Iron Man core. That's what makes you unstoppable. And God has it for you. You've got to find it.
And what does he say? Ask and you shall receive. And you got to go to God believing. I did that the other day, man. Me being a pastor, stuff like that, sometimes I got to go to other pastors too, or even just other friends that I hold in high regard. And he reminded me, he's like, man, just ask God, bro. And he's kind of a hippie kid, and he's like, no, man, he's just like, just ask God, bro. He'll give you the wisdom. And it was so simple. And I was like, it can't be that easy. And it's like, wait a minute, I'm going to do that. You know what I mean? I'd forgotten. Right. And I asked God, and lo and behold, he gave me the wisdom I needed.
Right. And one more thing, I'm going to break your rule. I'm going to give you two. The second one is never, ever, ever believe the lie that God doesn't want to say something to you, which means on reverse, he wants to say something directly to you. When he spoke to me, like he's given me prophetic words throughout the years, when he said to me, you've never learned how to be a son. That's how you know God's talking to you, when it's a phrase or a thing that you never would say in your brain. Yeah. And when he said that unleashed this journey. A lot of people struggle like in prayer. Like, I'm not hearing from God. I'm not hearing. Don't stop. He wants you to, how bad do you want it? How bad do you want it? He wants to talk to you. He wants to say something to you. Never believe the lie that he doesn't. He wants to say something directly to you in your heart that is only for you. Once you just never stop seeking that, because when you hear that from him, it will unleash you.
Amen. Right on, Dr. Greg Stewart. Thank you for coming on to our show. We'll have all your information on the show notes. It's been a great pleasure, man. We appreciate you.
Bless you, David. Bless you. My honor. We'll talk soon. Thank you, man.
God bless you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.